Now, you're probably looking at this picture and saying, well, who are these people? What are you about to talk about? And everything like that. But if you look at the title, that's what I'm about to discuss. So it doesn't have anything so much to do with the people in this picture. This could have been an advertisement. It could have been something taken for a website. It could have just been some random picture with a group of friends. Now, I was going through Facebook and I came across this article on Jason Black's Facebook group. And I said I have to talk about this, especially since this is my generation right here. And it's coming from CNBC.com. And it says, to retire at 65, millennials will have to save nearly half of their paycheck, which means that they would have to pretty much save half of every paycheck that they make. So you would think that on average, every person here who works a regular 9-to-5 job gets paid bi-weekly. So they would have to save their bi-weekly check, which basically is 2 weeks worth of pay, getting paid that third week or getting paid that second week from last week's work, that they would have to save that. So half of that check would have to go into retirement and the other half will have to go into expenses like bills. If you have a mortgage, if you have a car note, and God forbid if you have any student loan debt, like you would really have no money left. That's why in my generation, you're finding a lot of people have to work multiple jobs. Like back in our parents' time, they could survive and thrive off of one job. Nowadays, you need 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to survive, just to make it, quote unquote. You would have to have one job that would just go to expenses, maybe saving for retirement, and another job to maybe have something for yourself. And that's a huge maybe, because with stuff just going on the rise, it's just insanity. And of course, automation is right around the corner. Like, look it up. They said automation is really going to affect black people, especially ADO West, in a huge way come 2030. Not come 2030, but probably by it, which means it could definitely happen before then. But they're expected to be complete at least by 2030, which is in about 11 years. And 11 years can go by very fast. So I'm going to go ahead and read this article and see what else we can find out. If you think the standard recommendation of putting 15% of your paycheck toward retirement is impossible to achieve, get ready for an even bigger hurdle. At least one retirement expert thinks that number should be much higher. Millennials should aim to set aside nearly half of their income for the future, according to Olivia S. Mitchell, professor of insurance risk management and business economics and public policy and executive director of Wharton's Pension Research Council at the University of Pennsylvania. If you want to live off even half of your final salary in retirement, you need to save 40% of your income over the next 30 years. That's a long time. 30 years is a long time. And the crazy part about it is you got to think, some people who let's say you got in the workforce when you were 21 and it's 2019 now. Say you've been in the workforce for 10 years. Since this wasn't coming up 10 years ago, or maybe it was, but you may not have heard about it. If you had spending habits a certain way 10 years ago, you're already 10 years behind, which means now you're going to have to literally try to catch up for the next 20 years. And then if that's the case, you may have to work an additional 10 years to make up for the 10 years that you lost, if you get what I'm saying. That calculation, which is based on academic research from an MIT economist, takes into account a few assumptions. The biggest is that you want to retire at 65. That's not much of a stretch. About a third of millennials say they expect to retire between the ages of 65 and 69. You got to think, you work all that time and you got to save half your check. You can't really do nothing. And then by the time you retire and damn near in the grave, you really can't do nothing. You can't really experience anything. That's why corporate America, that's why you find a lot of millennials are finding other ways and means of making money, because when you factor all of this stuff in, you got to ask yourself, is it really worth it? However, 43% of millennials say they actually expect to retire earlier. Yet about half of millennials are planning to contribute less than 6% of their income to a 401k this year. Only about 1 in 5 is currently saving more than 15% of their income. The second major assumption is that investments return over the next decades aren't going to match the roughly 10% historical returns Americans have previously enjoyed. Most people that are not told by financial advisors that their future returns will likely be much lower than in the past and their future taxes will be likely much higher. Other experts agree. The economists at investing giant Vanguard predict that over the next 10 years, an annual U.S. stock market returns will likely average 3 to 5%. When you factor in inflation, which luckily Vanguard predicts will be below 2%, the real rate of return is expected to be under 3%. Morningstar Investment Management predicts an even more meager return, 1.8% over the next 10 years for U.S. stocks before adjusting for inflation. Meanwhile, perhaps the most pessimistic outlook comes from Boston-based asset management firm GMO, which expects real returns of negative 3.6% for U.S. large cap stocks and negative 1% for small cap stocks. It is also worth noting that 40% retirement savings rate calculation does not take into account Social Security's looming shortfall. That's another thing. My generation, we're not going to really be able to benefit from Social Security. By the time I'm able to qualify to really activate or use it, it's going to be dried up because it was all used up from the previous generations. I think Gen X is probably the last generation to really fully use Social Security as a retirement, part of their retirement cushion. And I think the baby boomers used the bulk of it. And then Gen X got whatever was left over, and we probably got crumbs, if that. So if we ain't getting nothing, you already know Gen Z, which is the generation after us, ain't getting shit. If saving almost half of your salary is not an option, what can you do to make sure your retirement fund is on track? You need to play with the math you have control over. Market returns may be out of your control, but when you plan to retire, it is more manageable. In general, Americans, especially millennials, will need to work longer and claim Social Security later. Benefits from Social Security are 76% higher if you claim at age 70 versus 62, which can substitute for a lot of extra savings. If you're able, don't retire, Mitchell says. Now, listen to that sentence. That's scary. If you are able to, don't retire. Like I said, they are going to literally work this generation until we are in the grave. Literally, from the corporate office to the grave. It used to be from the cradle to the grave. Now it's from the cradle to the corporate world to the corporate world to the grave. You don't even get a chance to make it back home. If you can keep working, do so. If you can't work full-time, work part-time. Every little bit helps. That's why you'll find like a lot of people who are in retirement age still be working like part-time. And these are people that's not even millennials. With the current unemployment rate the lowest it's been in decades, but let people in 45's camp tell it, they say it's going up, or it's whatever. Mitchell adds that this is a great time for older folks to get a job, which I have seen. Why you think a lot of those people are working at Walmart as Walmart greeters and all types of stuff like that. Of course, it does depend on the potential employee's skill set. People should continue investing in their skills well beyond 45 or 50. If you aren't a computer trained or have rusty computer skills, go out and learn the skills and keep sharpening them to be employable. And don't forget community colleges and other groups that are keen to train you. In addition to your job skills, you'll also need to maintain your health. Just over a third of Americans are forced into retirement sooner than they planned, many because of health setbacks. The most important thing is to invest in your health when you're young and middle age. Adding that a healthy lifestyle includes not smoking or drinking too much and getting a lot of sleep. Beyond simply planning to work longer, Mitchell says more Americans may need to consider purchasing an annuity as they get older. Although these products have been criticized by many experts for their high fees and opaque sales skills, Mitchell says she prefers deferred annuities because they are one of the few products available that some of the uncertainty of the equation and provide some protection to those who are living longer. These are true longevity insurance and will help generate a steady income when you're probably not able to work any longer. Now, I'm going to go based off of something that I've seen in the comment section for Jason Black. And he basically said that the baby boomers totally messed over the following generations. They could buy a whole house on 1 year's income. Now you can't even retire on half of your income. When you think about that, that is very scary. Think about what he just said. That the baby boomer generation were able to buy a house on 1 year worth of working. That means if they was to work in 1952 and 1953, they were able to buy a house from the work that they did from the previous year, as long as they managed their money correctly. Because, you know, at that time, depending on where you worked and where you lived, it was affordable. Now, in 2019, this generation has to literally scrape to save half of their income just so they can have enough in retirement by the time they turn 65. And because of how everything is now compared to how everything was then, it's kind of hard to do. It's very hard to do. Back then, it was very easy to save money. It was very easy. Nowadays, it's hard because it seems like everything just keeps coming up that you need to almost require attention to on a monetary level. I'm not saying go out there and splurge and buy every single thing and knowing damn well that you can't get it. But I'm just saying at the same time, inflation definitely plays a huge role in that. Like, in order to go to work, you got to get gas. And when you work, you may have to dress a certain way. So you're going to have to buy clothes or enough clothes to get you through the work week. If you drive to work and you work in a building and you have to pay you have to pay a parking permit, that comes out of your check. And then you got to think about all the other expenses that you have for your house. Like I mentioned earlier, lights, phone bill, internet. For those of you who have cable, that too. And you got to think about doing all of that while still trying to while still being able to save your income after you pay for all of that. And once you do that, you really have no money left for yourself. So literally all you're doing is just working. You're not really allowed to experience life. Is one term that I've heard in my life, and that is, if you have residual bills, why not have residual income? And you will be shocked and surprised by how many people in my generation do not have that or even know what that is. I've asked people, do y'all know what residual income is or have ever experienced before a day in your life? And many of them say no. They don't know. But then when you break it down to them, then they'll understand exactly what it is. But I'm glad I came across this article. I really did. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, because I'm curious to see what y'all have to say. And I'll talk to you in the next one.